Hi, and welcome back to, I think I call this Daniel's Dating Dilemma. It's not really a dilemma, I just wanted to do the alliteration. On the last episode, which you can watch, there's the link in the description, I made some dating accounts on 3 websites, on Tinder, OkCupid, and Asexual Cupid. And I started dating. This was primarily for me, but I was also recording it for the channel so I could get a better idea on what the online dating landscape looks like for aces. I was initially going to do these videos more frequently to give you updates on how it was going, but I didn't, and there's a reason for that, which I'll get to later. What I'm going to do is go through the sites and describe my experience of them. And I'm going to put this experience, I'm going to categorize into 5 categories. Those categories being ease of use, options for asexuals, the general community that I interacted with, so especially in regards to how friendly and open they were to asexuality, the barriers to entry, which includes cost and the kind of things you can do for free and things you can't do without paying, and how much it costs, and how enjoyable the experience was as a whole. So, without further ado, let's begin. I'm going to start with OkCupid because that is well known as being a good general dating site which is also friendly to asexuals. In terms of ease of use, I think OkCupid is relatively easy to use. The issues I did have with it were that it takes a while to get your account set up. And once you've done that, it's completely fine. You can kind of choose what stuff you put in and what stuff you don't, how much detail you put into it. And if you're on the dating site for a long time, you can slowly build up your profile so there's more information about you. And what that then does is make it more likely to find people to match with who are more like yourself. However, I found it was difficult to find people who liked you. This is because this is relegated to paying customers. In terms of the asexual options, this was probably the best I found outside of asexual dating sites. So they had asexual, demisexual, and a load of other sexualities you could choose from. Also, similar thing for gender options. They were very inclusive as a whole. I imagine they weren't comprehensive, but from what I can remember, it had a lot of options, and you could choose multiple ones. They didn't have romantic orientation, but I could choose multiple, so I could choose gay and asexual. I was quite often recommended people who are also ace, maybe due to the answers I gave the questions, and maybe due to the fact that it knew we were both asexual and therefore matched us together. However, it is true that people can just not read what you've put on your profile, so even if you have put you're asexual, they might just miss it. In terms of the people I interacted with, they're all nice, generally friendly and welcoming. People were accepting of asexuality. Generally, they just approached me with questions if they talked about it. But there were people who I talked to who didn't mention it. I don't know whether they didn't notice, they didn't care, or they didn't know what it was about. I don't know. There was one person who I'm pretty sure was there for a hookup. Obviously, that didn't happen. In terms of pricing and barriers to entry, most features on the site are free. The only problem, as I said earlier, is that you can't see who has liked you or who has messaged you directly on some sort of list without having to pay. Fortunately, the subscription is not expensive at all. I'll probably put the prices on the screen somewhere here. They don't look bad, do they? I don't know. Future me, help. But it is worth noting that if you run across someone and they have liked you or messaged you, it will say on their profile this person has liked you or messaged you. And if there is a mutual like between you, then you will be informed and there will be a list of people who are mutual matches. Finally, in terms of enjoyability, it was fun and pretty standard. What did annoy me is that you get a match thing, I think it's called double take, and it works similar to Tinder, how you get a person and you swipe them, or you don't swipe them, unswipe, anti-swipe, I don't know. But the thing is, you can't skip people. What I found with Tinder is that if you leave and then come back, it'll bring you a different person. So if I'm undecided, I'll just leave someone and get back to them later. But you can't do that on OkCupid, you can't skip people. Unless I'm missing something. Because they stay there forever. Forced to make a choice. And then that makes me bored because I don't want to be forced into making a choice. So overall, I would say that OkCupid is a good experience, if you're ace. I'm sorry I don't have more to say, I didn't get much time on it. Secondly, Asexual Cupid. Asexual Cupid is an asexual specific dating site. Hurrah, you'd think. But it's not very good. I'm going to say that bluntly, I'm sorry. So in terms of ease of use, it is painful. I guess setting up the profile isn't too bad, and you can search for people on it. The general aesthetic and user interface is clunky and a bit archaic, I would say. The main problem, however, is that you can't talk to people. I'll mention this again later, but talking to people, messaging people is behind a pay barrier, a quite significant pay barrier. I literally don't know how this site is useful without paying for it. In terms of the options for asexuality, I think it is fairly comprehensive. It's been a while since I looked at them, but it definitely has sexual and romantic orientation split, so that it is better than all the other ones on offer. That's a good thing I can say about it, yay! But to be honest, you kind of expect that from an asexual dating site, and I believe it could be more than it is. In terms of people I've interacted with, I've spoken to a couple of people on it. I did briefly, before this whole thing started, pay for a month and managed to have some short conversations. I've actually had 2 dates from it as well. One was because I stalked someone on it. I found their picture, I image searched their picture, linked to their Facebook, found them on Facebook, and talked to them on there. You shouldn't have to do that. And the second person was, this time round, they recognised me from my YouTube videos, and they messaged me, and then we had a date through that, and it was really nice. But you can't rely on stalking and being stalked, especially when the only reason they were able to stalk me because I have an online presence anyway within the asexual community. Now, on to my favourite category, the barriers to entry, the cost, how much money they're trying to squeeze out of you, and in this case, a lot. Here are the pricings for Asexual Cupid. And remember, you can't message people without paying these extortionately high fees. And even if you can, the community on Asexual Cupid is so small that it would be difficult to find anyone anyway. Unless you're rolling in money, I do recommend that you pay for this service. In terms of enjoyability, I did not find any pleasure on Asexual Cupid. Apart from the couple of dates I had, but I wouldn't attribute that to the site itself. I would attribute that to my stalking abilities and those of other people. And finally, Tinder. Now, I know what you're saying, random person. Tinder is a hookup app. Why are you using a hookup app if you're asexual? One, I haven't actually experienced any of the hookup culture in Tinder, so... And two, Tinder recently added an option to list your sexual orientation, including asexual and demisexual. So, it's possible. In terms of ease of use, Tinder is incredibly easy to use, perhaps too easy. Easy enough to become addictive. That's not necessarily a bad thing though. If you want to find a person to date, then like going past all the people will help you, I suppose. In terms of options for asexuality, I think you can list yourself as either asexual or demisexual. Those are the only ace spectrum terms which are in there. Sexualities, orientations, that's the word. You can't list your romantic orientation, but your sexuality, if you put it in, is listed front and center on your profile. So your picture will come up and it will say, Daniel, asexual. I think that's how it works. There is also the option to specifically be, well, to be more likely to be matched with people who match your own orientation. I did that, but I didn't actually see any of our aces, at least no one who identified outwardly as ace on their profile. In terms of the people I interacted with, I had some people ask me about asexuality and what it was. They were all understanding, and they didn't not go on a date because of it, if that makes sense. Though, to be fair, asking someone probing questions about the sexuality is not a good way to get to know them, really. What I did find was that most people didn't initiate conversation with me. I would match with them and I would have to be the first one to message, or no one would. To be fair, some people did message about a month after I matched with them, but you can't blame the app for that, can you? In terms of cost and barriers to entry, I didn't see any at all. There is a paid version which I believe gives you unlimited likes and some extra super likes. I never used a super like. I don't know if I even could. Maybe you can't free, I don't know. But my point is, I never ran out of likes and I never felt the need to pay for it. You can message people, you can match with people, you can do all the things. You just get more of it if you pay. So I think that's great. And in terms of enjoyability, I'd say it's fun. I don't particularly like the superficiality of it. The fact that you're given this picture of someone and you're supposed to decide whether you like them or not just based on that. So what I would normally do was check their profile. A lot of people didn't even have proper profiles. They might have just not had anything in there, or some links to other social medias. I don't know. I don't really like the whole swiping, but I was using it on the browser because there's a browser thing which no one knows. There's a browser site you can use Tinder through, and then I didn't have to swipe. I don't know, I just don't like phones, you know? But yes, overall it was a relatively enjoyable experience, mainly because of the amount of guys I could look at. And that is it for my 3 dating sites. I hope that was relatively comprehensive. I've tried to make a relatively clear picture of my impression of the 3. I would say overall OkCupid was probably my favourite, just because it's not as superficial as Tinder, and you can put a lot of information about you and it will match you based on all that information. So it is probably the most likely to get you a long-lasting connection. That being said, I think from my experience, Tinder was more effective. I think either of them are good options if you are asexual and looking to date people. I would say don't be afraid of the hookup culture in Tinder. If you make it clear to people that you're asexual and you don't want to hook up, then from my experience they'll understand. I was very picky with who I matched with or who I liked, who I swiped on the right swipes. I didn't do anyone who was sexually explicit or they looked like they were showing off their body in a way that was supposed to be sexually provocative. Don't use Asexual Cupid. And finally, the reason why this video is, one, the last video in this series, at least for a while, and two, it has taken so long to do, is because I was particularly lucky in that my efforts were successful and I found someone to date long term. So yes, I now have a boyfriend. We met on Tinder a few months ago, 2 months ago I think. I'm not properly counting because that takes effort and memory, But yeah, he doesn't identify as asexual, but that's not a problem with our relationship. We're making it work. And he really doesn't have a problem with asexuality either. He knows about the channel, he watches the videos. Sometimes I think maybe he's watching this now. I don't know. But I won't really be talking about my relationship any longer, or in any more depth, because I don't want to violate his or my privacy that much. I'll just let you know that it's going well. But yes, I think that's all I had to say today. If you want me to talk about this in further detail, if you want me to talk more about a specific site or app, do let me know. If you enjoyed this 2-episode series, then let me know. And if you have any other comments, leave them down below. I have evil hands. Perfect. If you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like. I post videos every Saturday, so if you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe. That is all I had to say today. Have a wonderful day, and I shall see you next time. My successful was quickly finished. That doesn't work. We can't be watching it now because now no one's watching it except for me, because I'm watching myself in the thing. But anyway, I don't care. Stop it, you, your glove hand.